Shabbos it is, it's true, but it's not Yontif, so Kanai Nahara, which means that we survived the Yontif. And those of you in my business will understand how special that is. So thank you very much for being here. Shana Tova. We start all over again today with Parshat Bereshit. Following our conversation today, there's a really nice bar mitzvah. It's Peyton, who's the child of our Hebrew school director. And then there'll be lunch after that. I'm not sure what it is because we're starting a new cycle, so I don't know whether it starts with kugel or blintzes or chili rellenos. But everyone is invited, of course, to lunch. This coming week, the College of Jewish Studies launches on Wednesday night. This year, we're going to do a survey of Jewish history. Our dear friend David Myers is professor at UCLA, and now the new president of the Center for Jewish History in New York, has published a very short introduction to Jewish history, where he sort of takes on the question of what are the lessons of Jewish history. So we'll start with that question, and then we'll establish a sort of rubric, and what we're going to do is look at 4 sort of ages of the Jewish people: biblical, rabbinic, medieval, and modern, and interrogate each one of those ages with a certain set of questions so that we can understand how the Jewish people, how Judaism, how the institutions of Jewish life evolved and changed over history. And in each era, what we'll do is we'll look at an overview of the era, and then a personality who is representative, a book that is representative, and the issues that were representative. So for the biblical era, we'll begin with an overview of the Bible. The personality will be King David, and our present presenter will be Rabbi Walpe from Sinai Temple, who's agreed to come. The book will be the book of Jeremiah, and our presenter will be Rabbi Zoe Klein from Temple Isaiah, who wrote a book on Jeremiah. And you'll see as we go through the history, that's what we're going to do. Wonderful people coming, and I think you'll enjoy this series. It's every Wednesday night at 7 o'clock. It's free. We welcome everybody. There's cookies served. We end very promptly at 9 o'clock, so you can get home before Ben and Jerry's closes, or whatever else is on television on Wednesday nights. So it'll be a wonderful opportunity to learn together. So please come for that. Torah study every Shabbos morning, 9 o'clock. Let me see, couple of other quick things, special things coming up in the next sort of period of time, besides tearing the building apart. My son is getting married. Finally, the Ufra, you're not invited to the wedding. I'm not even invited to the wedding. The wedding's very small. It's just family, basically. But the Ufruf is open to everybody. So it's the first Shabbat in November. I think it's November 3rd. 4th, November 4th. Everybody's invited to come. There's no bar mitzvah that morning. We'll have some music together. We'll daven together, and then we're putting on a big lunch. So whatever you want. Okay, so you're all invited to stay for lunch. And okay, yeah, Yona, yeah. Yeah, they're having my father's doing very well. In fact, he's on the hi, Dad. Yeah, he's watching the tapes. He's back to watching it. He's in a new place. He's in a board and care on Victory Boulevard. That's been very good to him. So his care his spirits are much better. His physical condition is improving, and we're hoping for the best. So, okay, so we're hoping if anyone wants to go see him, 23259 Victory Boulevard, 23259. I'll send it out if you want. It's everyone, and if anyone wants to go visit him, go visit him. He'd love to have visitors. He's lonely. So he's by himself out there in the middle of nowhere. So,
Rabbi, what's the cross street?
Fallbrook.
Woodlake.
It's Woodlake and Fallbrook, between Fallbrook and Woodlake.
No, it's after Woodlake.
It's after Woodlake. It's between Woodlake and the Canadian border. You know. Yeah, well, whatever it is, it's out. You get on Victory Boulevard and you keep driving until you see the sign that says "End of the World, half mile." That's where you are. It's way out in the West Valley. Okay, that's where we are. So I wish everybody Shana Tova. Hope it was a nice holiday for you. Okay. Okay, we are beginning over again. So we should say a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu mitzvotav etzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. What's interesting to me about the Torah, when I read it, when I prepare these parshiot, especially the ones back in Genesis with the stories that we all know, is to try to find what's invisible. What's invisible? What is it that we read and we sort of take so for granted that it turns invisible to us? because it's the invisible stuff to us that turns out to be the most important. It's the stuff that we've read past and say, wait a minute, I never noticed that. So here's something that's invisible, at least was invisible to me, maybe not to you. So here's the structure of the beginning of the book. You have two creation stories, one right after the other, and then a story about exile. And then you have a third creation story. This one is about the creation of civilization, and another story about exile. Now, why this story? Why exile? Of all the things that the Torah should begin with, why does it begin with this emphasis on exile? For first you have the exile of Adam and Eve from the garden, and then you have the exile of Cain from the world of the living. You have this reiteration of exile stories, and then if you really follow the rest of the Parsha, following Cain's exile, it's like the whole world is exile, because the whole world becomes estranged from God, and at the end of the Parsha ends on a downer. I mean, if I were writing the first chapter of a book, you would imagine it should be an up. You know, it should be a very happy book. God creates a world, and he loves it. No, this is in many ways a very Jewish book. God creates a world, and he kvetches. You know, it's like, oi, because the story ends at the very end of Parshat Bereshit with this terrible sense of failure. The whole thing is a failure. The whole creation of the universe, of mankind, is a failure. And at the end, God says, to hell with it. I'm going to throw it all away. And just before he does, his eye notices Noach, and that's how the movie comes to an end. Right, if you've ever watched movies that come in trilogies, you know, like the end of the first one is very unsettling because you're about to say, oh, he destroys the Death Star. That's the end. Thank God. Nope. There's one crumb of evil left in the world. In this case, it's one crumb of good left in the world. And you wonder, oh my God, is that going to save us? So, now, why would you tell a story that way? I mean, I just started thinking about this the other night. I could have told a very different creation story. Most cultures tell very different creation stories. We tell stories about triumph, about salvation, you don't tell a story that ends badly in this case. Now you could think of many different reasons why. Did you want to answer?
Yeah, I was going to give a
Go ahead.
Creativity is hard, and there's a lot of failure involved, and it's up and down, and there are seasons to creativity. Sometimes you work really, really hard, and then you have to stop for a while, and will I ever create anything again?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and so I think there's that's another way to look at that.
Yeah.
God, you know.
A lot of artists kill themselves.
Yeah, and they shouldn't.
They shouldn't. But there's a lot of depression among artists because you create something, you objectify what you created, you put it out into the world, you give it to the world, and it's never good enough.
Yeah, but I don't even think, I would say that everything is a draft, and you have to learn that process and not give up. And God had to learn how to create.
Okay, so this is a story of a creating God, learning the dynamics of psychological dynamics of creativity. Good, very interesting observation. Yes, please.
To follow this is like, I can do better than that.
Yeah,
Let me try again.
yeah. Very few artists create one piece of art and stop. Like Beethoven wrote 9 symphonies. Like, why did he need to write 9 symphonies? Wasn't one enough? You know, you write one, you're done. You know, how many of us have 9 symphonies in us, right? Even 4, even 3, right? And having written the 5th, why did he not? I mean, I would imagine if you could write Beethoven's 5th, why would you ever go on to number 6, right? But number 1, I mean, 9, I get it. 9, when you write Beethoven 9, then you can die because it's finished. I mean, there's nothing else to. You know, Van Gogh paints and he paints and he paints. Why doesn't he stop after Starry Night? You know, it's done. You've created the greatest piece of art in modern, the modern canon. But there's this sense in which I'm not finished, right? I'm not done. That's the dynamic, Sandy.
I think it's a great hook.
Yeah, it's a great hook.
Because
This is like Game of Thrones. We make you come back year after year after.
I'm always looking for the hook because I write poems for my grandchildren
Yeah.
every year.
Yeah.
And Hamilton gave me the hook.
Ah, yeah.
They knew it by heart. But also, the reality is that sometimes life is pretty horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And there's and here's a piece of good. So it keeps on. It really is like reality. Like we're living in this world right now, which is pretty awful, but in some parts. But there's goodness. There's still a piece of goodness.
Yeah.
If you want to go on.
Yeah. Historically, now if you wanted to think about this historically and critically, the stories of the Bible were created over many centuries. They were told as oral stories at a certain point in history, probably around the time of King David, around 1000. They were written down, but they were edited into a national epic in exile. So exile, it was the historical reality, the historical context of the editing of the epic. Now, and therefore the story is being created, the epic is being created by a community asking a question. What's the nature of exile? Is exile permanent? Are we never going to return home again? Is exile only ours, or does it belong to all of humanity? Is exile, has God estranged himself from us? So the question that the text is, you're right, the question that the text was created to answer is the question of what is our status now that we find ourselves far away from home by the waters of Babylon? You know, what is our status? So you start the story by saying, yeah, exile isn't just your problem. Exile is the problem of all humankind. You are only a microcosm of the larger human condition. Number one. Number two, it's God doesn't give up. I mean, you can imagine that this is the story and God gives up. End of story. Short book, right? But it doesn't. This is only Bereshit. This is only the first Parsha. There's 53 to go. There's a whole story coming about this. Yes?
I think it is, exile is everybody who's born human condition, because the first act of birth is exile.
Right. Right. And you're cast out of a Garden of Eden. Right? No, you're in this place where you have no responsibilities, no needs, no wants. Everything is solved for you, right? And then, you know, some OB-GYN, brutally pulls you from that and sticks you into, into the world. And it's cold, and you scream, right? And then the question, so there's this great rabbinic conversation about, would it have been better not to be born at all? And the answer is, yeah, but who has that choice, I mean, seriously, there's this really interesting conversation. So you have this meditation on this question of exile and the question of what does it mean to be far away from the place you were meant to be. So let's take a look at one of these three stories. So I'm going to suggest that there are three creation stories. The first creation story is this beautiful, elegant story in chapter 1, where everything rolls out of God in this beautiful order. It's a gorgeous story because it's so clean and it's so elegant. There's no resistance. There's no conflict. There's not even a conflict between God and the material of creation. Whenever an artist creates something, it's a contest between the will of the artist, the vision of the artist, and the material out of which the artist creates. A sculptor has to wrestle something out of the stone. Right? A poet has to wrestle meaning out of the words, right? In my case, I try to make a challah, right? I'm an artist. I try to make a challah, right? And I try to convince this dough this week it's going to be a beautiful challah. And the dough says to me, no, I'm going to be a glump. I'm just going to be a lump, And it's no, and some weeks I win and some weeks the challah wins because it pushes back against the effort of the vision of the artist. But in the beginning of Genesis, you get none of that. The story is so gorgeously elegant, right? This is this image of pristine creation. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et ha'aretz. In the beginning, God creates everything, right? V'ha'aretz hayta tohu vavohu. The world was mishmash. Tohu vavohu, mishmash. V'choshech al pnei tehom. And darkness over the face of the darkness. Tehom is actually the name of a god of the Mesopotamians, but it's used here as a symbol of utter emptiness, right? V'ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim. And God's Spirit hovering over Pnei Hamayim, the water. So I thought there was nothing yet, but there's water. So water becomes the Bible's symbol for uncreated chaos, unordered, uncosmosed chaos. If you've ever had a roof leak, you know why that is. Because the contractor comes to you and says, I don't know where it's coming in. You say, what do you mean you don't know where it's coming in? Well, you have this giant roof, and water can go wherever it wants. It doesn't have an order to it. It doesn't have shape. It is shapeless. Water then becomes the symbol. And by the way, for the rest of the Bible, wherever water shows up in a story, bad stuff happens. Because water is the shape of uncreated chaos. And what's going to happen? Look at verse 3 on page 4, if you're there. Vayomer Elohim. God says, Yehi Or. Now, the translation, the beautiful translation is, let there be light. Yehi means, but Yehi doesn't even mean let there be, in the sense of, that Yehi just means be. It's the tzivui form of the word haya, you know, be light. And what's beautiful is there's no consonant in that phrase, except the resh at the end. So you're literally hearing the sound of a divine breath, right? Yehi Or. Just be light. Not even be light, just light is. Is light. That would be the right translation. And then suddenly there's light, which is so cool. I mean, how do you create that way? That's the image, that's the pristine fantasy of creation, right? I sit in front of my computer and I say, be sermon, you know? And I stood in front of my kids and I said, be a mensch, you know? But but that doesn't work that way for us, because you can't create that way. God simply conceives of it, and it conceives. I mean, the word conception is such a great word, because it means to think of something and then to have, to actually give birth to it, right? But here, we can't do that. We can't do that. We try. We imagine we can. But the kid pushes back. I don't know how many of you have raised children, but it's they have their own little minds, the little bastards. And they they push back, and they want to be themselves. And you want, no. And by the way, this was one of the great arguments. This was one of the great arguments that formed the Western tradition. Was there pre-existent material out of which God created the world? Okay? Because if there's pre-existent material out of which God forms the world, then that pre-existent material is of its own self and has a resistance. It pushes back against the divine will, and so you end up with a philosophy of Gnosticism which understands the idea that the body is of one stuff and the soul is of another. And the body pushes back against the soul. And there is a contest between spirituality and earthliness and materiality, and that's the great contest of life. And if there's a contest between materiality and spirituality, you have to torture the flesh in order to release and liberate the spirit. Or if you've ever been on a diet, you know how true that is, right? Because you say to yourself, I am a thin person packed into this fat person's body. I will go on the diet, right? I will show myself that I am strong enough to resist the temptation of chocolate chip ice cream. And so you take the chocolate chip ice cream, put it in the back of the freezer, put a 40-pound turkey in front of it, close the freezer, wrap a bungee cord around the thing, go to the other side of the house with your cup of tea and your rye crisp cracker, and the ice cream calls to you. I'm here, come find me, If you eat me with a spoon while the freezer's open, it doesn't count. But that's the body. That's the body pushing back, right? The body pushing back against. So this becomes a whole theology of body versus spirit based on the idea that there was pre-existent material out of which God created the world, right? And this gets political too, by the way, because if that's your idea, then sexuality becomes suspect. Sexuality becomes unholy because it's the body's desire, not the soul's expression, and therefore sexuality should be repressed. And if sexuality should be repressed, right, that's one of the theories behind saying contraception is unholy. Because if the body should be repressed, then having sex for fun is sinful. And if having sex for fun is sinful, then the only reason you should have sex is for procreation, and having contraception available to women You know, and that becomes a political thing. And that's how you end up with that politic, with that political opinion. So here's the beginning of that argument right here. Whether there's pre-existent material out of which God creates the world. The whole Gnostic spirituality, right? And V'yar Elohim or kitov, God sees that it's good. And over again, this is going to be Genesis's refrain. It's good. It's good. Vayavdel Elohim ben or lachoshek, there's this separation between light and its opposite, darkness.
But there was darkness before.
Yeah, well, darkness, he said, the question is darkness, that's a wonderful question. So is darkness a real thing, or is darkness the absence of light? You see it? But here it seems to me maybe darkness is a real thing. I mean, there's like, you know, like there's like insidious darkness in the world, right? Right? Vayikra Elohim yom v'lechoshek kara laila vayi'er vayiboker yom echad. This is the elegant creation of the world in chapter 1. And then you want to ask something? I saw your hand up a minute ago.
Well, I just want to say in our tradition we pray with a God who speaks to create everything.
Right.
Baruch She'amah.
Yeah. Baruch Shem Rafa Olam. Blesses the one who speaks and the world comes into being. What's wonderful about that statement, that's a rabbinic phrase. Baruch She'amar v'haya ha'olam. It's also a prayer in the prayer book, but it begins as a phrase in the Talmud. What's interesting about that, of course, is that you and I have the same capacity. Now, we can't create physical realities out of words. We may try. You know, you look into the microwave when you're tired and say, let there be lunch, and garnished, you know. But what we can do is we create social realities. We create relationships, families, communities, nations out of words, right? So Baruch She'amar v'haya ha'olam is a great double entendre, because it's blessed is the one who creates the physical world out of words, but it's blessed is anyone who speaks and creates worlds out of words. And that prayer occurs at the very beginning of the morning prayer service, which is to say, I'm about to use words to affect to express my worship. Words have power. And I'm going to recognize that this is one of the things that God and I share, that God has shared with me the power of words to create realities, and I'm acutely aware that the words I'm about to say matter, that words matter, that the way we use words matter. It's a wonderful double entendre. So if you read that prayer, read it twice. First read it through as if it were talking about God, then read it a second time as if it was talking about us. Right? Baruch she'amar v'hayolam Baruch hu Baruch oseh Bereshit Baruch omer v'yoseh. It's a really interesting double entendre. Every line is a double entendre. It's a double meaning. Okay? Right, someone else had a hand up, and I successfully. Yes, David.
You talked about the invisible.
Yeah.
Okay. You talked about darkness. Was already there. God created light. He didn't create darkness in this story.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So, but what is the nature of darkness? It's a really interesting. Is darkness the absence of light, or is darkness something else? Is it something? Right? Is there a something called choshech?
And it's not God created.
Now, take this and apply this to moral categories. Right? There's good. Is there evil? Is evil the absence of good, or is evil a thing? Does it have its own independent existence? Does it have will? I mean, you see, it's a very interesting meditation on the world that I bump into. Have you ever bumped into a darkness that seemed to be real? Not just what was there before you switched on the light, but there's a kind of darkness that's like there. You know, that's of itself, it has its own reality. That's a very interesting, it's a wonderful, wonderful observation, a wonderful, wonderful question. Take a look at one more day of, yes, please.
Well, in Isaiah, he says, somewhere, I don't know where it's, I am the Lord who creates light and creates darkness.
Yeah, it's Oseh Shal, it's Borei et ha'or ve'yotzer et ha'choshech, right, Yotzer or v'rei choshech. I create light and I create darkness. But here there's darkness before he started creating. So the question is, what's that mean? That statement was trying to repeal and replace. Repeal and replace the dualistic idea that darkness is somehow separated from God, that darkness is God's enemy. which is, by the way, that also has a long history, because from that idea, you get Satan as a separate entity from God. You know, this sort of personification of evil, this force for evil in the world that's not subject to the rule of God, and God is at war with Satan, and that's another whole politics, right? Take one more look. Take a look at one more day of creation, because this next day is interesting, right? So if you'll take a, where are we? Back on page. This is just an elegant story. It's just a beautifully elegant story. We're on page 6. Vayomer Elohim, verse 6, page 6, verse 6. Vayomer Elohim, yehi rakia betoch hamayim. Rakia is a wonderful word, reka. It means an open space. So you have this sense of a world of water, which represents a world of chaos, right? So you have, and he says, let there be an opening, just an open space, in the midst of the water. Vayehi mavdil bein mayim lemayim. And there's a separation between water and water. Vayas Elohim et rakia vayavdil bein hamayim asher mitachat lerakia ubein hamayim asher mi'al lerakia. Vayehi chen. Let there be this space, and let there be a separation between the water below and the water above. So what do you got below you? Water. If you dig down, you will find water, right? But if you dig down in any human endeavor, you'll find chaos. It's chaos too. That water is chaos. And what's above you? That means that you're living under an ocean. Just consider that for a moment, right? You're living under an ocean. It's, you know, like that exhibit in SeaWorld where you walk through and the sharks are on top of you. You're living under an ocean, and you're living over an ocean. And more than that, you're living under an ocean of chaos. There's like all around you is this chaos. And you're living in this small rakia, this small open space of ordered universe. You get that idea? There's a precariousness to human existence. There's a bracha that's said in the morning service, Baruch Rokaha Aretz al Hamayim, that God opens up this space of cosmos, of ordered universe, in the midst of all of the schmutz, the mess and then sometimes what happens, of course, is it leaks. No, the chaos leaks. You ever have a sense that the chaos leaks down upon you? Meaning, sometimes stuff happens and it's like, what? Where did that go? Well, it leaks. It either comes down from a, you know, and what's going to happen, by the way, in the flood is he's going to open the faucets. And the chaos above and the chaos below is going to flood the world, right? And there's one more image I just want to offer, then we're going to move on. The other image, of course, is in the beginning of the book of Exodus, we're going to stand in front of the Red Sea. Once again, water. And what's God going to do for us then? Separate, a rakia. You're going to make another space in the middle of the sea. So cosmos begins by giving us an open space within the chaos of the physical universe, and history begins when there's an open space in the middle of the chaos of the moral universe. And these are the image of opening water up so you can walk between is this image of creating something ordered in the midst of all of the craziness, the insanity, the chaos of the world. Someone over here had I'm trying to, over here. Yes, hi.
I had my hand up before, but you didn't see it.
I'm sorry, my mother had eyes in the back of her head, but I don't.
Is it too late to talk about Choshech?
Yes, not right now, because I want to move on to the next thing. Yes, please.
Yeah, what I don't understand is we can't live without water. So
Yes.
That's the absence of chaos.
So that's an interesting question. So water here is being used as a metaphor, right? It's being used as a symbol of chaos, right? But physical water you need. In fact, you're made of it. So what does that mean? That the human being is what, 92% water or something? You're a bucket of water and 82 cents of chemicals, right? I mean, think about how much chaos is in the human being. That's exactly right, right? You know some people that are more chaos than yeah, I'm telling you, it's.
So, can you just extrapolate a little bit on that last thing about history being the
Well,
opening for...
Think of this. The book of Exodus is acutely aware of the book of Genesis. The guys who wrote Exodus knew Genesis, right? And they consciously organize the narrative to point back to Genesis, right? So if the Genesis narrative starts with the creation of the world as the opening of a space within chaos, the Exodus narrative is going to refer back to that and say, this is the opening of history through chaos. The chaos of history is the enslavement of human beings. And history begins as the process of moving from slavery to freedom. And that's the ordered progress of history. If you could say there's progress in history, that's what you're looking for.
That's a jump.
Oh, yes.
That's an extrapolation.
Oh, it's all it's literary. These are literary extrapolations. Of course they are. But you see, but it's tied together in this sense that there's a conversation between these texts. Yes, please.
When was water created?
Well, it doesn't say. It was there from the beginning.
So was
Yeah.
Hoshech and
See?
Ma'im were there prior?
Yeah.
So this was the material that God worked with?
Well, not necessarily. This could be the symbol of mishmash. This is not the material, but because there's this whole notion of there was no material. But this is just the symbol of look, it's really hard to talk about nothing. If I want to say, before there was anything, there was nothing. And you'd say, well, what's nothing like? Well, in order to tell you what nothing is like, I have to compare it to something. You see? So you use metaphors to describe nothingness. Right? You use metaphors to describe nothingness. So they're using water and darkness as the two metaphors to describe nothingness. Okay? In the second chapter, by the way, Tohu Vavohu is...
Hoshech and Ma'im.
And the other thing you need to know is that in Middle Eastern mythology, all these words are loaded words. Tohu Vavohu are technical words, names of gods in the Middle Eastern ancient mythologies. Tahom is the name of this sea monster. I mean, so they used all of these words that were common in their world, but they used them in different ways. If you look to chapter 2, you get a different metaphor. So in chapter 2, we start the creation all over again. This is a different story. We're on page 13. Here's a second story of creation, which is a much more folksy story. And it's on purpose, because chapter 1 is written by the priestly tradition, and chapter 2 is written by the folks. This was the folk tradition. This was J.E., right? Bayom asot Adonai Elohim eretz v'shamayim. When the Lord God made heaven and earth, when no shrub of the field was yet on earth, and no grass of the field had yet sprouted. So here you need a symbol for nothingness. What is it here? In chapter 1, it was Choshech and Mayim. What is it here? Barren desert. That's their symbol of nothingness, right? Lancaster. Palmdale, you know, right? Right? Canoga Park on a Saturday night. I'm on page 13, verse 5. So they use this symbol of barren desert as the symbol of nothingness. And why not? Because there are two conditions of the world, of life in the world that are missing. Because God had not sent rain. Here, water represents blessing. It represents the beginning of life, not chaos, right? It's complete opposite meaning of it. And there was no man to till the soil. So this text says human beings are a necessary condition for the sprouting of life on the planet. And then you're going to get both of them. First, you're going to get water, and then you're going to get man, the human being. And then you're going to get man put into this garden, this wonderful garden. And then you're going to get woman, and then you're going to get tsuras. No, it's true, right? You're going to get problems. You're going to get problems, right? And she's going to take the fruit, and they're going to get tossed out of the garden. And then, what's the first thing they do when they get tossed out of the garden? They go out and they start they start the world. So here's chapter 3 on page 17, and here's the third creation story. We've had the creation of the human being and the creation of the physical cosmos. What we haven't yet had is the creation of civilization. Now, what's interesting here is that in other traditions, in the Middle Eastern mythologies, civilization and all of its accoutrements, all of its symbols, were created by the gods. There were gods of agriculture, gods of music, gods of war, gods of this, gods of that. Here, everything's created by us. Look at the next line, right? The two of them were naked, the man and his wife. They felt no shame. Well, we did that once, so let's turn to chapter 4, right? Here we go. I'll come back to this in a second. Now, the man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain. And she said, I've gained a male child with the help of the Lord. And she bore his brother Abel, and Abel became a keeper of sheep, and Cain a tiller of the soil. Well, there you go, the two primeval occupations, right? Agriculture and herding. It's shepherding, right? What do you call that? Husbandry. Is that what it's called? Right? And then you have the story of these two brothers. And if you follow the story, we'll come back in just a moment. Hi, Mick. Come on in.
Thank you.
Come in. It's good to see you. Okay, somebody move over and make some room for Mickey. Okay? We're going to see the creation of civilization at the end of this story. Right? Look at page 28. Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch, and they founded a city and named the city after his son Enoch. So Enochville, okay, was created. Now, the first city was created by the descendants of Cain. The Bible hates cities, and that tells you why, right? And then you get all these other guys: Enoch, Irad, Mehujael, Methusael, Lamech, and Lamech is a bad guy, right? And if you look at the bottom, verse 21, right? And the name of his brother was Jubal, and he was the ancestors of all who played the lyre and the pipe. Music, created by the people of the world, right? And Zillah bore Tubal-Cain, who forged implements of copper and iron. So all of the functions of civilization are created in this story not by the gods, but by people. But they happen to be an interesting group of people. Who are they? They're all the descendants of Cain. Now, what does that mean? Right? That civilization is created out of violence. It's a really interesting kind of observation, right? Now, let's go back to the story. Let's go back to the story, because this story, this is the story. This is a third creation story, because it's the creation of the family, of the human family. And it's the creation of civilization. It's the creation of human settlement. Everything else was cosmic. This is our creation, right? Let's look at this very carefully now, right? We're on page 24. We just got tossed from the garden. We're outside of the garden. And what's the first thing we do when we're outside of the garden? We begin families. Now, why is that? Think about that for a minute. The garden, having been tossed from the garden, we are cursed with mortality. Death is now real. And knowing that death is now real, the human response is create a different kind of immortality. A different sort of immortality through physical immortality, through family. Yeah.
How did they know what death is?
How do they know? They know. They know. I know, but they don't. They know. You're right. They know. V'hadam yada et Chava. He is intimate with his wife. Now, that's so wonderful because, first of all, so their intimacy is a response to the catastrophe. I mean, like Herschel Fox was born in a DP camp after the war. The rates of fertility in those DP camps were astronomical. Having suffered catastrophe, the survivors decided to make life. And by the way, it's interesting because, she's the one who gets him kicked out of paradise. So you can imagine the argument they had in the car on the way home. I told you not to eat the damn fruit. Well, if I wasn't supposed to eat the damn fruit, why did you eat of it? Well, I'm always doing what you tell me to do, and it always gets... But somehow man and woman find their way. I mean, it's interesting that having faced this catastrophe, they're now bonded intimately. That's a kind of a nice thing when you think about it. I mean, apparently he blamed her earlier, but now there's a sort of intimacy, right? Vatahar vateled et Cain. She conceives and she gives birth to Cain. Vitomar, and in the Bible, names are always significant. Now look at the name. The name is Cain, and she gives us the name, the derivation of the name. Now you're going to have to learn some Hebrew, folks. Kaniti ish et Adonai. Kaniti ish literally means, I have acquired a man. Acquired means, kaniti in modern Hebrew means to buy. But you acquired, I have gained, I have acquired a man, et Adonai. Now, et can mean with, it can mean from, it can mean but. Now, who is the ish? Now, think for a minute. Who is the ish? So one way, look at the translation. You can see his interpretation of it. Translations are always interpretations. I have gained a male child. The word is ish, which means man. He translated as male child. So for the translator, the phrase refers to the baby. And what is she saying? How do people come into the world before? God created them. How did this person come into the world? I created them. Eve is saying, I did what only God could do. I created a person. But no, hang on. We'll get to that in a minute. Yes and no. But first I want you to feel the wonder and the pride, maybe the triumphalism, right? Look what I did. I did something that only God can do. I created a human being. Okay, can anybody think of another way to read that verse? Maybe Ish isn't the baby. Maybe Ish is the husband. Maybe she is afraid that now that they've been exiled, they'll be exiled from each other. And what she's saying is, now that we are parents, now we are bonded together. He's mine. I mean, think about that for a moment. And parenting, I don't know how many of you know this, but it changes your marriage. You know, severe sleep deprivation will do wonders for your sex life, I'm telling you. You know, and for your intimacy. You know, it's like you look at each other and you say, tonight? You say, no, we're sleeping tonight, you know. Right? Yes?
Can you read it as Keniti Ish et Adonai?
Meaning what?
Man created God.
It's Ish. What do you do with the word Ish?
That's man.
Yes, I created man et Adonai, but God?
Well, the et would be the
Yeah.
grammatical.
Yes.
Direct object. Right.
I created God? I created man who is God?
The God.
No, I don't think so. But now here the question is it with God? Now, the translator says with the help of the Lord. So he added the word help of. It says with God. So this could be the wonder of any mother who gives birth to a child and says, I've done a miracle with God's help. Right? No, it's not Jesus. It's not Jesus. It's I've created a man with God. Or it could say maybe the opposite. I don't need him. I don't need God. I did this myself, despite God. Right? You put me in exile. You didn't think I could do this. I did it. I did it. I mean, there's something. Kaniti et Adonai would be very different. There's Ish in there. Yes, Jerry.
I just wanted to point out that later on in the book of Genesis, when we get to the matriarchs, we find that they all have problems with barrenness.
Yeah.
And although they argue with their husbands sometimes, it's obvious that the real issue is God, who actually is given
Manipulating history through
situation
fertility.
And I think that goes with the religious concept
Yeah.
of what fertility is,
Right.
which is a three-party process.
Right. A blessing.
Father, the mother, and God.
And God. Right.
All have to be on the same page.
Right. Now look at the next line. I'm going to push ahead because I just want to push. Right. V'tosef laledet et echav et hevel. That's achiv. Right. Tosef means she goes on laledet to give birth to, but it doesn't say she conceived. It only says she gave birth. So the Midrash jumps in and says he's a twin. Right? A twin, because there's no conception, just birth, right? Et achiv. Now, this boy, this second child, is identified not as her son, but as his brother. Telling you that his primary relationship is not going to be to the parent, to the brother, right? Et hevel. Now, hevel is a hugely loaded word, and yet she doesn't define it the way she did Cain. She doesn't tell us the origin of that name. What is hevel? Hevel is the first word in the book of Kohelet, in the book of Ecclesiastes, when he says futility. I told you last week when we did Kohelet, hevel is early morning, low clouds and fog burning off by 10 o'clock. It means ethereal, ephemeral, not permanent, not here very long, soon to depart. That's a hell of a name to give a kid. Right? Meet my kid, futility and despair. I mean, that's a strange name, right? Now, So right away, it's a very strange narrative, right? Look, keep going with me, right? Now, then it tells us the following. So I want you to notice the order of things. Who's born first? Cain, Abel, right? Now watch the next verse. Vayihi Hevel roet son. Hevel, Abel was the roet son, was a shepherd of sheep. V'Kain haya oved adama. So it's Cain, Abel, Abel, Cain. Do you see how that works? Cain, Abel, born. Abel is the shepherd. Cain is the farmer. Vayihi miketz yamim. After some time. Bible's not interested in how they grew up. Just what's happened. Right? V'yaveh Kain mi priya adama mincha Adonai. Now, what's bizarre here is that it's Adonai. It's not Elohim. Right? Miketz yamim. After some time, Cain brings of the fruit of the ground mincha, a worship gift. Who invents religion? Cain. He has an impulse to bring a gift to God. Completely natural religion. Impulse, and he knows to do it by bringing a gift to God. Right? Vehevel, hevi gamhu mibchorot tsono, right? Umechelvan. He also brings from the choice of his fruit and from its fat, from the best part of the flock. So it goes how? So remember the narrative is Cain, Abel, Abel, Cain. Now we go again. Cain, Abel, right? Vayas Adonai et Hevel ve'minchato ve'et Cain et minchato lo sha'a. And God paid attention to Abel's, but to Cain's he paid no attention. Same structure. Cain, Abel, Abel, Cain. Why didn't God accept Cain's? Why doesn't God accept Cain's offering? Yeah, all the time. it's what I. Well, that's true. But I mean, you see what? So we have a very interesting. Whose initiative was it to bring something? It was Cain's, and yet for some reason his offering isn't accepted.
How does he know?
What? Well, that's an interesting question. That you don't quite know why he knows that, but he knows it.
What's the meaning of the word choices?
Yeah, it means that mi bechorot, the bechor, the first fruits of his flock. So the Midrash says that it describes the goodness of Abel's. The Midrash will point out that we're told how good Abel's offering was, but that Cain's offering was just from the vegetables. So that could be, that's the Midrash's idea, that one brought the best and one brought, if you bring the best of your money to the synagogue, better things happen to you. I want to tell you that I don't care where your money comes from, we'll take it. Yes, please.
Is there any possibility that when it says Vayihi miketz yamim, that it could be that it was at the end of the harvest, it wasn't the first fruits of his?
It doesn't say. You could construct that. You can construct that, but it just says after some time. Religion is invented. So now we have the invention of religion as a part of civilization. But we also have the strangest thing happens in the course of the creation of religion. You have an offering not accepted. In other words, as religion is being invented, you have the invention of bad religion as well as good religion. And what's going to happen? Yes, please, go ahead, jump in.
No, I just wanted to say that we don't know. It is the perception. We don't know whose offering God accepted.
Well, the Torah does. I mean, I like that. I like that interpretation. I think I offered it last year. But yeah, you can read the tape. You watch the tape. But and I like it. But for a moment, for just a moment, let's go with the pshat. Let's go with the simple meaning of the text. The simple meaning of the text is Cain knew that his offering was not accepted. No, he knew. Let's just go with it that he knew it. Okay, that he knew it. So the question is, why doesn't God accept it? Number one, and number two, what happens next? Look what happens next. Right. Well, watch what happens next. So the Lord said to Cain, "Vayomer Adonai el Cain." Right? Lama charalach. Why are you so angry? Now, how do you read that line? Lama charalach. Why are you so angry? Lama naflu panecha. Why are you so depressed?
He reacted to the fact that he's
So God sees Cain's response, right?
sad.
By the way, who is Cain angry at? Who should he be angry at? He should be angry at God, but who is he angry at? Why? Why is he angry at his brother instead of angry at God?
He was
What,
looking for something.
what does it mean? Does it give you any pause that the Torah's third story, first of all, is about genocide? It's about murder.
And about brothers.
A quarter of the population of the world is killed in this story. And second of all, that religion is the reason why. Isn't that strange? What is this? Why would you put that so up on top? I mean, you begin the Torah with this elegant story of God's creation where everything is perfect. And then you start telling how people came into the world and screwed it up. And you begin with this story that the first expression of thankfulness to God leads to murder. It's so mind-boggling. It's like, why would you choose that story of all stories to tell? Why is that this preeminent story? Now just listen to God's words to him, right? Why are you distressed? Charalach doesn't mean distressed. Charalach means pissed off, angry. Naflu fanecha means your face is fallen, you're depressed, right? Hello. The word is hello in Hebrew. Hello, right? Im titev shet. If you do what's right, right? If you do what's right, there is uplift. Se'et, which means you can carry it, you can bear it. But if you don't do what's right, im lo titev, if you're not good, it says, literally, if you're not good, lepetach chatat rovetz. Oh, what a great phrase. What? Tetiv, if you're good of heart, if your heart is good, if you are a good human.
So he's giving him another chance.
He's telling him morality precedes religion. You can't practice religion without morality. No, if you do, it becomes murderous. That's what he's trying to tell him. And this phrase of Lav petach chatat rovetz, these are very short little phrases. They're almost like tiny cliches, right? Rovetz, the image of rovetz is the dog about to bite you.
Right.
It's this dog. It's this dog that's posed to lunge at you. Sin is lunging at you, right? Its urge, its urge is toward you, right? But you can be its master. What is God saying to him? Why is this here? Is that true? Can you control this? Is God telling him he can control it? Is God asking him if he? Are these questions or these answers? I mean, it's a strange moral thing, right?
Well, he's giving him what he's capable of.
Right.
It's a lesson.
Yeah, okay. So he's telling him what? You have a
You tell a child, if you touch it, you touch a hot thing,
Right.
you will get hurt.
Yeah.
And if you don't,
All right, so what are you saying? But think about, that's a beautiful example. Thank you. There are philosophers that say that morality is innate. That we are built, that we start out with morality, and civilization corrupts us and turns us bad. What does this story say? Yeah, there's not Yetzer Hara. It's worse than that. It's morality is not innate. Murder is innate. You have you have this capacity to destroy, and there's nothing in you to stop it, except if you choose to. You teach the child not to touch the stove. So to the Torah's idea is that morality is not innate. Morality has to be taught. Morality is an outside. It's an outside. We'll get to him in a minute. He has the wonderful thing about him is, like Rashi, he has a wonderful way of making his commentary known, right? Right. We'll get to you in a minute. Let me just finish Let me finish the sentence, and then we'll ask Rabbi Gelman for his commentary, right? Morality has to be offered on top of the human being. It's not born. It's not inborn. Even to the brother you were born with. And that's what the story is about. That you could kill your brother with impunity, right? Means that kind of morality is not inborn. That kind of morality has to come. And that's what God is trying to tell him. What God is trying to tell him is, yeah, this is a new capacity which you haven't yet developed. It's the capacity to say, no, I'm not going to kill my brother, even if I'm enraged, even if I'm filled with rage. It's interesting to me that he's angry at the brother, not angry at God, though. Right? That's how we take it out on the brother, not on God. He should be angry at God. Yeah, that's the point. But he's jealous and he's angry at his brother. And God says to him, you don't have you have to develop the capacity to control that part of yourself, or else the world's going to be destroyed. Rabbi Gelman, have you a word to say?
One word.
Why would I have a word? Why? What? This is perfect, as usual. This is an interpretation of the story of the garden and the creation that really is flawless. What you offered us is...
There's a but coming, you know that.
However...
There it is. There it is. Oh, thank God. For a moment I thought you weren't well.
The fundamental belief of the Torah is precisely and exactly the opposite of what you have taught us. I know you taught us because you're aware of this and you were trying to...
Go ahead. If commit Stavra, right.
But your view of the garden and Cain and Abel was the view of Thomas Hobbes.
Mm-hmm.
It was his view that each man is the wolf of his neighbor. Homo hominis lupus. How we would say it.
Right.
Each man is the wolf of his neighbor. That the fundamental nature of humankind is aggressiveness and murderous hostility.
Mm-hmm.
That tradition has roots from Freud to Marx to Nietzsche to Schopenhauer to Fichte, all the way straight through to Hegel. It is a fundamental view of humankind, and in fact, Jefferson, because the American independence is built upon this idea of protecting ourselves from the hostile incursions of others.
Right.
As Marx said in an essay in 1844, we see in our neighbor the source of our limitation, not the source of our fulfillment.
Mm-hmm.
What if it is true? What if there is some chance that the Torah has the opposite view?
Okay.
That, as the final rabbinic distillation of it says, "Haneshama shenatata li tahorahi," that the soul you have implanted within me is pure and good.
Okay.
What if we look at the Garden of Eden story as if we were Christians, and we don't even realize we're reading it as Christians?
Mm-hmm.
We see it as a fall. But actually, what is gained in the expulsion? Knowledge of good and evil,
Mm-hmm.
and love in its fullest sense.
Mm-hmm.
From erotic love to coitus to procreation, all. So if I had to ask you, what are the two fundaments, what are the two greatest acquisitions of Homo sapiens, you could make a very good case that knowledge of good and evil and knowledge of love
Right.
are the only two things that distinguish us from animals.
Okay.
Therefore, what we have here is a story of birth into our full nature as humans.
Mm-hmm.
Not a fall in any way, and that in fact our goodness remains. The story of Cain and Abel is a slap against sacrifice. Cain says God needs us to bring things. God never said bring things. God never said offer a sacrifice. This is totally human creation. Our natural goodness is our heritage, and against this entire philosophical tradition, there is only one document that stands against it.
Mhm.
And that is the one that you have reversed today.
Yes. Thank you.
But I love you. There's no way to fix that.
Eloquent, informed, learned, scholarly, deep,
However,
reflective,
however,
and dead wrong. Just dead wrong. Haneshama shenatata b'tohara he doesn't mean we're good. It means we start pure. It doesn't mean we're good. There's no goodness here. Goodness is the choice. And imposing a moral code upon a human being is the discipline that it takes to create that choice. But left to our natures, I turn to my brother and try to kill him because he has what I want. He has my father's attention. He has my father's love. And that's the story of the rest of the Torah. The story of the rest of the Torah is brother against brother. And the question at the end of Genesis, which we start with and we end with, is the great question of the psalmist. Hine ma tovu manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Can you ever get brothers to live together in peace? And inasmuch as the Torah was put together in exile, right, from the fragments of a broken community that couldn't get its act together, first we had a split between North and South, and then we had splits within the community. This was also a communal decision, a communal question. So I think that you're right. I mean, I'm not just with the whole thing. I don't see the fall as a fall. I don't see the fall as a fall. What I do see is it's a revelation. It's a meditation. This is a long meditation on what does it mean to be a human being? What does it mean to be human? And what is the task of civilization? What's the task of religious culture? And inasmuch as this comes at the beginning of the Torah, this is a preface. What's the rest of the book about? The rest of the book is going to try to make you into a mensch, knowing full well that without a moral code, you're going to kill your brother. You're always going to find a reason to hate the brother. So I'm going to give you a moral code that's going to teach you to see the world through different eyes. I don't think we disagree.
I declare this match a draw.
A draw, there you go.
I think you're going back to the very beginning of your question, and that was chaos.
Yeah.
That you said,
Chaos within.
Chaos was the beginning. Each of these chapters is about chaos.
Right.
And here now you have human beings.
Very nice.
trying to handle.
So at the beginning we have chaos, and God forms the chaos, right? And I told you that in Exodus we have chaos. History is chaos. Slavery is the greatest form of chaos, and out of chaos we create historical meaning by moving from slavery to freedom, right? Here the question is, how about a chaos within? The moral chaos of the human being. The capacity of a human being to turn to his brother. And it's amazing that over and over again, Abel, is identified as Achiv, his brother. Over and over again. Like the Torah wants to remind you, there's no stranger. This is no mugging, you know. In New York, you get mugged because the guy doesn't know you. This is mishpacha. This is within the mishpacha. Dafka, you hate the guy within the mishpacha, right? There's this moral chaos within, and the question is, can I create order out of that chaos? Which is going to be the task of the rest of the book. Okay. Yes.
Rabbi, why don't we ever focus on the cause of this hostility?
Which is?
the unfairness of God.
Yes.
Or the fathers.
Yeah.
Not looking the same at their two sons.
So here's the question. So the question is, number one, was it unfair or was it justified? Number two, in order to answer that question, you have to ask the question, why does God not pay attention to Cain's offering? After it was his idea. Now, there's a great deal of, and as much as he didn't ask for it, why does he pay attention to anything? Right? But so there's a great deal of interesting midrash. So I'll give you two just to keep an eye on. So three. One is if you look at the Cain, Abel, Cain alternations, the one who comes first is always the favored one. Cain's born first. So it's Cain's born first, then Abel, right? Then Abel is the tiller of this, is the shepherd, and Cain is the farmer. What does the Torah have against farmers? Well, first of all, we started out as shepherds. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, shepherds, right? crossing the desert, we're shepherds. We come with our sheep, remember? The Bible, one of the arguments is this is an argument against agriculture. That there's something wrong with agriculture, that there is a religious flaw within the psychological structure of agriculture. And what's the religious flaw within the psychological structure of agriculture? You plant crops and they grow, and what do you say? Look what I grew. Same thing Mama said about Cain. Look what I did, right? Despite God. In other words, so that's one argument.
And Mama did that with
You could say that's one argument. Another argument you could say is, another way to look at it is this argument of the choice fruits, that there was something different about Cain's giving. The third argument is the one that Mel adumbrated a few moments ago, which is, you have a fire, you have a grill, you put vegetables, you put meat, it's all going to burn up. This idea that one sacrifice is accepted and the other is not is all in Cain's head. It's all in Cain's head, because there never has been a brother, an older brother, from Cain and Abel to the Smothers brothers, who didn't say, Mom loves you more. Every brother feels this. This is endemic to the nature of brotherhood, which is one of the strange reasons why we always pray for brotherhood. Because, like, brotherhood, sister works better than brother. But so the question is there's nothing objective here. It's completely subjective. It's completely subjective. It's all something in his own head, but it's part of what we are as human beings to look at the other and say, he has more blessings than me and I'm angry and jealous. That becomes, Sandy, go. That's going to be the Bible's the Bible's stories are all going to be angry, against older brothers. Yeah.
And one thing that I kept thinking about is Abel's sacrifice is a sheep, and all through history in the Bible, it's giving a sheep or burning a sheep or
Yeah.
the story of Abraham.
We are shepherds. We are shepherds, and that's what we bring. So this might be a hint to the idea that we're shepherds. Andy, hi.
It seems to me there's another component to water.
Yeah.
You can think of water as being chaotic and violent. Think of hurricanes or tidal waves or floods. But also it's orchestrated beauty. Think of Niagara Falls or Boozer Falls in South America. And it becomes almost aspirational.
It's beautiful.
In a second sense.
Yeah.
That you have an evolution. That much of what you were saying is how the human being is to evolve over a period of time and understand and learn from the circumstances. But so you can see it in a more dramatic fashion, but water.
Right. And so there's that's a beautiful statement. There's a philosopher named Suzanne Langer who says that human beings are drawn to water because oceans, lakes, water represents infinity. And somehow we all want to be attached to something infinite, something that has no boundaries. And water, because it has no boundaries, attracts us. So 85% of the world's population lives next to water. Right? That's why global warming is so dangerous. If we all lived in Nebraska, who cares if global warming happens? But if you live in Santa Monica, this is an issue. This is an issue. I want to finish just quickly. Let me just finish quickly. So we have three stories of creation and 2 stories of exile. Chapter 1 and chapter 2 both create the world. We get into the garden and we get tossed out of the garden. Cain and Abel, and then Abel gets exiled from home. He gets sent out into the world to wander the world. Cain gets sent out to wander the world. So over and over again in these early chapters, the predominant theme is that sin, disappointing God, leads to exile. It leads to sending you to a place far from where you belong, far from home, which is exactly the historical material condition of the community that created the Torah. But what's what's wonderful, what's reassuring is that, as Rabbi Gelman pointed out, in each case, we supersede that, we transcend that exile, and something remarkable happens, right? So we get thrown out of the Garden of Eden, and we begin families. And that's our response to the garden. We don't give up. We don't sit down and die. I mean, you could tell a different story. They got thrown out of the Garden of Eden, so they sat down and died. They didn't do that. They began to create life on their own terms. Cain is exiled from home, and his community, his people, his children, and his grandchildren, his descendants, create civilization. They create They create metal, and from metal they create musical instruments, and they create culture, and they create cities. We create civilization as a response to exile, which is a statement to the exile community that exile isn't the end of the story, it's the beginning. It's an invitation to create new forms of civilized life. Bobby, yes?
Okay, there's so many things that.
Yes, I know, that's why you have a whole year to study it, so,
But I just want to bring up one point.
okay.
Eve had curiosity. I don't necessarily look at the apple as a bad thing. She was curious. And all of this that follows from her being curious can be said to have created the world and everything else that you just enumerated.
Yeah,
Think
yeah.
about that.
No, no, I'm not down on Eve. Listen, I don't know if you know this, my mother was a woman, my wife is a woman, my daughter is a woman. I have a high regard for.
Okay, wait, stop. I would ask you to bring in the woman's aspect.
Yeah.
You know that I'm going to say that. We
Yeah.
talk about brothers,
Yeah.
but
Would sisters be the same story?
I don't know.
Do sisters live with the same quality of jealousy that brothers do?
Would it be or would it be different?
Now, the difference is that instead of killing him all at once with a rock, she would gossip her to death. That's what, you know. That's how sisters would be. That's how sisters would be. It wasn't an apple. It wasn't. An apple is a later Christian addition. It was probably we don't know what it was. It was a fruit. It was the magic fruit. Yeah, pomegranate, fig, pineapple. Who knows? Right. Next week we're going to have a flood, so bring your umbrella. See you next week. Take care.